for 10 years, 15 men flew an aircraft weighing more than 410,000 pounds, carrying a weapon powerful enough to wipe out an entire civilization. If they crashed, an American city could be burned to the ground. If they completed their mission, a Soviet city would vanish from the map. They lived between those two nightmares, day after day. In 1946, the Second World War had just ended. Americans were celebrating victory, welcoming soldiers home, dreaming of a long era of peace. But in Fort Worth, Texas, inside the Convair aircraft factory, a different kind of work was underway, designing the end of the world. The U.S. Army Air Forces gave the engineers a nearly impossible assignment: build a bomber that could fly from the United States to Moscow, more than 8,000 kilometers away, drop an atomic bomb, and return without refueling, without forward bases, without stopping. Because America's new enemy, the Soviet Union, lay on the other side of the planet. And the new weapon, the atomic bomb, was both heavy and demanding. It had to be delivered with absolute precision. Looking at the requirements, the engineers understood they would have to create the largest aircraft in history. They gave it a beautiful name, the B-36 Peacemaker. But they knew very well this was not a machine built to preserve peace. It was designed to threaten destruction, so total that peace would be the only rational choice. The B-36 was a monster in every sense. Its wings stretched 70 meters, longer than the distance of the Wright brothers' first flight. 6 huge piston engines were mounted in a pusher configuration so the propellers would not block the pilot's view, and later versions added 4 jet engines to increase speed. The crew had a half-joking, half-serious nickname for it: 6 turning, 4 burning. The aircraft stood as tall as a 4-story building and flew at more than 13,000 meters beyond the reach of most fighters of the time. It carried a crew of 15 and could stay in the air for more than 40 hours without refueling. Inside its enormous bomb bay, it could carry nuclear weapons with explosive yields measured in millions of tons of TNT. In 1949, the first B-36 officially entered service. That was also when the Cold War truly began to heat up. The Soviets blockaded Berlin. China fell to communism. The Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb, much earlier than American intelligence had predicted. America understood that the balance of power was shifting. It needed a clear warning sent to Stalin: if you attack us or our allies, we can reach you. We can destroy you, no matter how far away you are. The B-36 was that warning, a flying message, a promise of nuclear retaliation hanging in the sky. Yet behind the thick metal skin and the impressive statistics were real human beings, living with real fear. Captain James Cooney, one of the early B-36 commanders in the 1950s, later recalled, "You are flying a 70-meter-long aircraft with 10 engines. A single failure can be enough for a catastrophe. You are carrying nuclear bombs. If the plane goes down over American soil, you might kill hundreds of thousands of your own people. You fly for 30 or 40 hours straight, exhausted to the point of hallucination. And you know very clearly that if war ever truly breaks out, your mission is to enter Soviet airspace, drop bombs that will kill millions of people, and almost certainly never come home." Every training flight in a B-36 was a prolonged test of nerves, and not every aircraft passed that test. On February 13, 1950, a B-36 was on a training mission, simulating a nuclear attack on San Francisco. On board was a real Mark IV atomic bomb, without its plutonium core, so it could not produce a nuclear blast. As the aircraft flew over the frozen mountains of Canada, 3 of its 6 piston engines caught fire. In freezing weather, at an altitude of around 2,400 meters, the commander was forced to order the crew to abandon the aircraft. They parachuted into the wilderness. The B-36 switched to autopilot, programmed to head out over the Pacific to avoid populated areas, but it never reached the ocean. The bomber slammed into the side of Kologet Mountain on Princess Royal Island. The conventional explosives in the bomb detonated, producing a large explosion, but there was no nuclear reaction. The Mark IV casing, containing uranium, was destroyed, scattering radioactive material across the mountainside. 5 men died in the bailout, either because their parachutes failed or they froze to death in the blizzard. The others had to fight the brutal wilderness for days before they were rescued. At first, the U.S. Air Force claimed the bomb had been jettisoned safely into the sea. Only much later did the truth emerge. The bomb was still on board when the aircraft crashed. It was the first broken arrow, the term for accidents involving nuclear weapons, and it would not be the last. Over the course of a decade, the B-36's accident rate was considered terrifying. At least 10 were lost, some crashing near American cities and killing civilians. Each time, chilling questions echoed. Was there a nuclear bomb on board? Did it explode? And how much land would be contaminated if the worst had happened? The pilots understood the risks. The public rarely heard the full story. And yet, the crews kept flying. That was the brutal logic of the Cold War. Nuclear deterrence depended on the Soviet Union, believing that the United States would truly strike back. That meant B-36 crews had to be ready at any moment to launch on what was essentially a suicide mission. Many pilots later said, everyone knew that if the order ever came, there would be no return flight. The mission was one way: drop the bombs, then try to reach a neutral country like Sweden or Turkey before running out of fuel. Survival was possible, but unlikely. The mission still had to be carried out. Imagine being 24 years old with a wife and a small child. In the morning, you go to work, climb into a gigantic aircraft loaded with nuclear bombs, and fly 12 hours over the ocean and Arctic ice. You know that if one day the real order comes, that flight will end your life somewhere over the Soviet Union. In the evening, you come home, eat dinner with your family, kiss your child goodnight, and try to sleep. The next morning, you repeat the cycle. Not everyone can live with that psychological weight. It is no surprise that rates of alcoholism, divorce, and mental breakdown in this force were very high. Some men ended their own lives, but the Air Force could not publicly admit this. If the world learned that the core nuclear deterrent force was mentally unstable, the entire strategy of deterrence would be shaken. So the crews kept flying, kept training, kept drinking, and kept trying to forget that they were carrying doomsday in their bomb bay. By the mid-1950s, the B-36 was becoming obsolete. The jet age arrived with the B-47 and then the B-52, faster, smaller, and more efficient. In 1959, the last B-36 flight took place. Over 10 years, 383 aircraft had been built. Dozens of accidents had occurred. Many people died, and hundreds carried invisible psychological wounds. But one strange number stands out. Not a single B-36 ever flew an actual combat mission. It sounds pointless at first, but the very fact that it was never used in combat is proof that it did its job. The B-36 was a bridge between the Second World War and the Cold War, between the era of propellers and the era of jets, between conventional war and the possibility of global annihilation. It symbolized a cold reality, a time when peace was maintained by fear. Peace through fear. The 15 men on every B-36 mission carried that paradox inside them. They were soldiers trained to fight, yet they flew machines built in the hope they would never have to be used. They trained for missions that, if ever carried out, would kill millions of people and might end civilization itself. They were both protectors and potential bringers of destruction, heroes and messengers of the apocalypse. Today, a few B-36s still rest silently in museums, under warm lights and information boards for curious visitors. People see them as huge, impressive relics of the past, but behind the cold metal lie years in which human beings lived with the fear that tomorrow could be the last day of the world. The B-36 Peacemaker, an aircraft designed never to fight, reminds us that peace can come with a very high price, even when not a single shot is fired.